Ethel will get you one. She's a good Bible go-getter. And Matthew 21, verse 12. Now let's look at this the way we've come to understand that we look at this, not literally. As the Apostle Paul said, be not a minister of the letter. So let's look at this spiritually. Page 22. Now for those of you who are not familiar with using a Bible, the pages start from 1 to 600 and something through the Old Testament. Then they end and they begin at 1 and go on in the New Testament. So we're at page 22 of the New Testament in these little Bibles. For those of you who are watching at home, and for the rest of you, you're at Matthew 21 and verse 12. We're looking at this spiritually. We don't want to look at this literally. We're not interested in really looking at a history lesson. If you want a history lesson, you go to college to get a history lesson. You want to read a novel, you can go to the bookstore. But you've got a Bible in your hand. That means it's a spirit book. It means it's a mystical book. It's a book that talks about the universal presence of that which we have been known to call God. It says, Jesus went into the temple of God. I want you to look at that. And Jesus went into the temple of God and cast out all them that sold and bought in the temple and overthrew the tables of the money changers and the seats of them that sold doves. But let's go back to the first sentence. And Jesus went into the temple of God. Now, turn to page 157 in your New Testament. For the rest of you, go to 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians. I want you to keep your finger there in that Matthew where you were, Matthew 21:12, if you can find that. Go to 1 Corinthians and go to chapter 3, page 157 in the New Testament in those little Bibles. 1 Corinthians chapter 3. Now, if you've got your finger back where we started this, and what does it say in Matthew 21:12? And Jesus went into the temple of God. Do you see that? Now look at 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 16. Know you not that you are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwells in you? Where did Jesus go? Into the temple of God. Where is the temple of God? You are. It's not talking about a man walking into a church. There could have nothing pleased the historical Jesus less than going into a church. They said to him, whoa, what a beautiful building that is. And he said, there's not going to be one rock left standing on top of the other because it's irrelevant. The temple is a temple that's made not with human hands. So it says, Jesus went into the temple of God. The Apostle Paul says, don't you know that you are the temple of God? This is talking about not a literal physical Jesus. It's talking about a Christ that enters within your consciousness, which is the temple of God. And I want to kind of emphasize that as we go along so that you understand what we're talking about here. This is a Bible. It is not literal. It is mystical, spiritual. It has to do with consciousness. It has to do with the kingdom which is within you. And this must going to be a good day because I got an itchy nose. And you know what happens when I get an itchy nose? It gets very radical. It's very itchy. So that is the one way a lot of people get the Spirit, by jumping up and down. Other people sing Amazing Grace. Other people go hallelujah. Some people fall on the floor. My nose itches when this happens. And then for those of you who are watching on television, I don't want you to get the wrong idea. Here's the pastor in the church. How do you know everybody? No, that's not very nice. It just itches on the outside. If it itched on the inside, I would really be in a lot of trouble standing up here on Sunday morning. But so just bear with me to know what's going on. And that is the way the Spirit talks to me, you know. I got to say something. I can't stand up here just doing it. But when I get excited about something, it does. My nose gets itchy. I don't have an allergy. I'm excited. No, God, here we're starting already. What? No, this is the way it is. It's got to be raw life, you know. It's got to be the way it is. But I need you to really sit here and understand that one line. Jesus went into the temple of God means Christ consciousness. And the temple of God is you. And we've seen that. He went into the temple of God. Paul says the temple of God is you. And what does he say he did? Matthew 21, verse 12, back where we started this. He cast out all of them that sold and bought in the temple. What is being cast out by the higher mind, the higher divine mind, are those lower desires which are obsessed with gain. those lower desires which are obsessed with gaining material wealth, gaining material strength, gaining a material position, because those are the things that drive you nuts. That's called the bottomless pit. It's desire. You never got enough. I never got enough. I know when I first got married to this woman here, the blonde sitting over here, you know, we used to leave a trail of credit cards all over North Jersey, everywhere we went. And we'd go into Bamberger's with our credit card because we had to buy something. Why did you have to buy something? Because it's Saturday and there's nothing else to do, so we'll buy something. And we went up to buy something, and we would get our Bamberger's credit card out, and the lady would stick it in the slot and go, brr, brr, brr. The red light would come on. Oh, well, must be an oversight of some kind. We'll have to check with the management and stick it back in our... And we'd run out. Well, we still have our Sears card, so we'll go down there. Bought a pool table once, didn't we? Never played it one day. It sat down there. The balls never moved. There was a pool table. I didn't know how to play pool. Why did I have one? Because I wanted a pool table. Never played pool for the rest of my life. I had a cuckoo clock. Had to have a cuckoo clock. Right, and you had to have a cuckoo. Everybody had a cuckoo clock. I didn't think it was anything more wonderful than having a cuckoo clock. Until this thing started coming out every half hour going, cuckoo, cuckoo. We'd lay in bed. Good night, dearest Joan. Everybody comfortable? Good night. Cuckoo, cuckoo. That's the end of that. The cuckoo clock went in the garage. $400 sitting in the garage. $500 for the pool table. Not one ball moved on that table for 4 years. Some we gave it away, and they used it for a lamp. I mean, this is the things that we did, see? And it was just that it was never, there was no end to it. That's called the key to the bottomless pit. You see that in the book of Revelation. The bottomless pit is the never-ending desire to get, you know. Once you got what you wanted, in 6 months, it sits in the corner. Go up in your attic and look at all of the things that you just had to have. I gotta have this. And if I just have this, I'll never ask for anything else again. And it sits up there. Go up in the closet there. It's filled with your old memories and all of your old frustrations, and it's all covered with dust and junk, and it doesn't mean anything anymore. But this is what it is. And so what happens when Christ comes in, he drives that out, not to the point where you don't ever desire, but you have a different desire. Really, your desire is that which is the desire of what they call this New Age, a desire to see peace, a desire to see the animals taken care of, a desire to see the ecology in the world taken care of, a desire not to see people fighting anymore, and a desire that people come into this place within themselves, Buddha called nirvana, of a blessedness and a quietness and a chance just to be one with another. It's a beautiful, beautiful desire. So that's what he's doing. He's driving out the money changers. He's trying to just simply say, yes, be comfortable, but don't be obsessed with it because it'll kill you. The bottomless pit gets at the root, it gets at the core of everything that you are, and it just rips you until it continues to drive you onto this and this. And Donald Trump's a perfect example of it. He's a good man. But I mean, it is. No, I'm saying it's I'm very serious about it. It's a decent man, but so there's no end to it. And you get to the point where you've accomplished and you've gotten everything that could possibly be in the world, and your life is miserable. You've gotten to the point where you no longer, you can't hardly appear in public, you can't face people, your entire life starts to go into a shambles, and yet you have every conceivable thing. Elvis Presley, Marilyn Monroe, and the history books are filled with people. It's simply that becomes the God instead of understanding what God really is. So he casts out all of them that bought and sold in the temple, means that when Christ comes into you, what does it cast out? Thought, desire, desires to have, constant desires to have, constant desires to fulfill yourself. And it also says, and he overthrew the tables of the money changers and the seats of them that sold doves. Doves symbolize purity. Okay? They fly, which means they're in the higher consciousness. They're white, which means It's the virgin mind. And what is going on here? They're selling these things. In other words, you're entering now, you've come into a different situation. You may not feel that same desire that you felt before because now you've got a new way of getting the stuff. You can meditate for it. See? So what are you doing? You're using the dove. You're using that which flies in the higher mind. You're using that which is of whiteness, purity, the higher mind, the virgin mind, and you want this car, you want this VCR, you want this, you want that, you want the other thing. So you'll come on a Tuesday night and you'll sit and you'll cross your legs and you'll lift your arms. But all the while, what you're trying to do is not just seek that which is all things. You're trying to seek a specific thing out of your meditation. What you're doing is you're trying to bargain, you're trying to barter in dove selling. And he overturns that because the dove is something that can never be used by you. It can be received, but it cannot be used for gain. Don't you see what happened? What this is talking about has nothing to do with Jesus going into a temple, overthrowing this and overthrowing that. This talks about Christ coming into you and driving out those thoughts which are driving you nuts, thinking that you've got to do this and you've got to do that, and what are people going to think if you don't do this? You know? Isn't that the thing? What are they going to think? Now the big question, who are they? But they are always there, and we always are concerned of what they are going to think. And so here, those money changers, those thoughts that drive you onto this obsession that you've got to live up to them are driven out. And then what he drives out in your consciousness is this idea that you can use spirituality to gain something. You don't pray for money, Christ is money. You don't pray for health, Christ is health. You don't pray for communion within your family, Christ is communion within your family. In other words, you go to God for God. And once you become that which is the I am, these things come. What did Jesus say? Seek first the kingdom of God which is within you, and all of these other things will come into play. So all of this happened when Jesus went into the temple. And remember, when he went into the temple of God, the Apostle Paul says, you've got to understand, don't you know that you are the temple of God? He's going into you. Christ is coming into you. By your willingness to allow that door to the right side to be opened up. So if you're the temple, let's take a look at you. What was that? Did you hear something? Was that me? Was it me? Temple stones. Let's take a look at the temple. Did you see the fact that the Apostle Paul said, you are the temple? Let's take a look at it. Let's go to page 296 in the Old Testament. In the Old Testament now, not in the New Testament. 296 in the Old Testament. For the rest of you, I want you to go to 1 Kings. Now remember, you're the temple. And so if the temple is going to be built in structure, it's going to be built in the same way that that temple within you must be built. 1 Kings chapter 6. And I want to show you something about the temple. You all there? 1 Kings chapter 6, verse 7. And the house, meaning the temple, when it was building, was made of stone. That's the first thing. Made of stone. It's natural. Every time you see construction in the Bible, it's either made of stone, which is natural, or it's made of brick, which is handmade. Brick is made of mud and slime, and it comes out of the lowest part of the earth, and it is the construction of man. And everything that is artificial or falls to pieces in the Bible is made of brick. It's made of your own effort. What was the Tower of Babel made of? Brick. If you don't know it, you can look it up. The temple is made of stone. It's natural. It is made by God. That's the first thing. Second thing, notice something. And the house, when it was building, was built of stone made ready before, so that it was brought. There was neither hammer nor axe nor any tool of iron heard in the house while it was building. It was built in silence. Look at it. Look at it. There was not a sound heard. In other words, how can you build your temple in silence? by sitting down and raising yourself up into the virgin consciousness that Jesus talked about. Take no thought, and in silence the temple will be. It was built in silence. Now I want to show you something. The middle chamber is the holiest place. 1 Kings 6:8 says, the door for the middle chamber was in the right side. Why? Why did they put the door to the middle chamber in the right side? I mean, did they have to, was that what the building permit said, the building code, local politicians, you got to put it on the right side? No, the mysticism of this is that the holy place sits at the right side of the temple of God. You are the temple of God, and the right side of the right hemisphere of your brain, the right hemisphere of your mind, is the place of the creative divine power where God dwells. In the right side. In the right side. There's a reason that it's put in the right side. And look what it says. And they, meaning stairs, went up with winding stairs into the middle chamber. Those of you who have followed the mystery of the ancients, the teachings of the ancient masters, know that that energy is all cyclic, whether it be in the outer universe or in you. And as you begin to meditate, which the ancients called kundalini, is a circular motion that moves upward and upward and upward, and finally it touches the pineal gland of the brain and moves to the right side. It's built with winding stairs that go up into the middle chamber, which means the right side, and out of the middle chamber into the third. Sometimes you get a chance and you look at the Apostle Paul and the experience that he had an out-of-body experience which took him up into the third heaven. The third heaven. What is the third heaven? It's the way, and that is also what is called in Greek air. It's the third stage of consciousness. The first is earth, the second is water, the third is air, and air means the unseen spirit, where there is no thought. And if you know, the Bible says that when Jesus comes back, you will rise to meet him in the air. In other words, you will rise into the third stage of consciousness and meet him in the air. So the whole story then is about consciousness. Let me read you something about Ralph Waldo Emerson. Who ever heard of Ralph Waldo Emerson? Ralph Emerson would have been enough. Waldo we should have left out. But anyhow, guy was a pretty good writer. You know what he says? God builds his temple in the heart on the ruins of churches and religion. Hello, Ralph Waldo. I have a hand for Ralph Waldo. Who was he? I don't know who he was. He wrote a... Didn't he write something, my captain, my captain? Did he write that? Yeah, Franklin Roosevelt said that. Wait a minute. I'm going to come over. Get a picture of Emil over here. What does he say?
Ralph Waldo Emerson said the only thing to fear is fear itself.
He did?
Yeah.
And you mean that Franklin Roosevelt copied that?
Franklin Roosevelt just read that in a book.
Oh. Okay. I'm glad we straightened that out. Yeah, we got this straightened out. All right. But let me tell you what's inside and what this is all about. Inside of you, listen, you know, come on, you give me a half hour, you'll be out of here and it's all over with, but just for a half hour, here's something. Maybe you'll take it with you, and maybe you'll sneak into the bathroom when you get home, and you'll run the water. Nobody will know what you're doing in there, and you'll go into that temple within yourself, and you'll have that experience that'll happen anywhere. Because inside of you is an enshrined spirit essence, which is an altar that links the innermost with the outermost. Inside of you, that occurs. That occurs. And that's the Holy of Holies. It's called the Ark. Called the robe of glory, called the Shekinah, called the causal body. The holy place of the temple is the source of divine power. Look at page 206 in your New Testament. The rest of you go to the book of Hebrews. Book of Hebrews, and it's on page 206 in your New Testament. Go to the book Hebrews chapter 10. Hebrews chapter 10. All right? Now we go to verse 19. Having therefore, brethren, boldness to enter into the holiest by the blood of Jesus. entering into the holiest. Where is it? Have you ever been there? How many people? Before you ever came to the, how many ever knew where it was? Did you know where the holiest is? Go on, church. Go and ask them if they've ever been there. Go ask these guys on television. They tell you how much money to give them. They tell you all of this stuff. They say, you got to do this, got to do that, got to do this, got to... Send them a letter. Say, listen, I'll send you some money. Have you ever been into the holiest? And all you'll get back is an envelope, you know, to send more. But ask them if they've ever been into the holiest. Oh, where is it? It says in 1 Kings 6:8 that it's on the right side. And all you have to do to get to the right side is shut down the left side. When you shut down the left side of your brain by taking no thought, you activate the right side and you enter into the holiest. That's called tithing. And when anybody says you should tithe, hang on to your wallet with dear life. Put it in here. Don't let them see it. Don't let them see it. Because they have taken that, which is the letter, and deprived poor people of food money to perpetuate their Gothic cathedrals. It's a sham. Tithing has nothing to do with giving anybody money. Tithing is a way of God saying to you, I want the 10% that you use. In other words, I want the left side of your brain. I want the intellectual side. I want the human side. I want the physical side. I want the ego side. You give that to me. You tithe that to me. And I'll give you the 100%. I'll open up the right side. That's what tithing is. It has nothing to do whatsoever with giving money. Never meant to be. That's why Jesus said if you cast your net to the right side, you get so many fish, you won't be able to count them all. And so Jesus' word finally explodes within your temple. Within here, where he drove the money changers out of the... Do you have one? Why did they call it that? Do you know what you have at the back where you sit? Well, I know you know that, but let me give you another word for it. God, on television, don't yell out. When Lucifer, which means bright star, because of the 5 points, star's not too good, but has 5 points, means the 5 senses, fell, he became Satan. Star goes down, Satan. Jesus comes along, takes the 5 wounds, crucifies the 5 senses, hands, feet, and side. The star, I'll make it out, goes up. Bright morning stars. Happens in Golgotha, which means consciousness. It means skull. This is all acted out in your body, and you're sitting on it. You have 33 vertebrae in your spine when you were born. Between the age of 1 and 6, the 5 bottom vertebrae fuse into one. It's the same thing. It's the 5 that fall. It's the 5 that become one again with God. It is the 5 that fall that become Satan, and it is Jesus that comes along, takes the 5, and reasserts that with a oneness with God. The 5 bones that fuse at the base of your spine to become one are called sacrum. It means the holy place. Who called it that? And you may say, I'm full of baloney, and a few people have said that. Hard to believe. But I guarantee you one thing. If you reach behind, you're sitting on your sacrum. It's there. And ain't nobody can say anything about that. I'll testify. Oh, look out. Now that you just led me into my second hit. Judy, my second hit. Now you should know this because you're here. But that's true. This is the temple. That's the sacrum. This is the solar plexus, which means the Son of Man, right smack in your abdomen. And your solar plexus is surrounded by the 12 sympathetic nerve systems. In the same way, the signs of the zodiac surround the sun, the same way the 12 disciples surround Jesus Christ. Now getting to Judy's question. Now this is just, I'm throwing this in. This is no extra charge. We're not going to take a second offering for this. When Sister Doodad gets up in your church to testify, are you ready for this? Go to Genesis 24. First book in the Bible. Shouldn't be too hard for you to find. If you can't find the first book in the Bible, then we'll have to have some remedial reading lessons here. But anyhow, you'll probably find it. Genesis 24. Okay? You ready? How many have found it? Page 18 in your little Bible. I'm going to give you the origin of the word testify. And it's, if you have any children in the room, you might want to send them into the closet while we discuss this. The little adult stuff here, the old Sunday morning service. We must do this because this is a fact. I know you may say I'm crazy, and there are some people, as I said, who have said that. Nonetheless, this is true. And Genesis 24, verse 2. And Abraham said unto his eldest servant of his house that ruled over all that he had, Put, I pray thee, thy hand under my thigh, and I will make thee swear. Well, of course, somebody could say, you put your hand under my thigh, and I'll swear too. But anyhow. Are you with me? What they used to do in the old days, and I'm not going to get graphic because we're on television, but nowadays we put our hand over our heart and we swear. That's the way we take an oath. Okay? In the old days, they put their hand over the male sexual organ. Easy? That's a fact. If you will look in your dictionary, you will find the word testy. And it means the male sexual organ, and it also means to give witness. And that is the origin of the word testify. New Testament, Old Testament, testify, that's where it came from. And that's what they used to do in the old days. Go home and tell them what you learned at the Christian Village trip. Go to the pastor and say, Pastor, you're not going to testify in there, are you? All right. But you know, you have to go home and look in the dictionary and see this. Webster wouldn't lie. It's a fact. It's where it came from. That's what they used. Did you see it? Did you see it in the Bible? Women. That's right. Judge Jones says women were not allowed to testify for obvious reasons. Oh my God. Now look, let's get done with this so that you can go and whatever you do. Back where we were on page 22, Matthew 21. Thank you, Judy, incidentally, on resurrecting that one. Matthew 21:13. And Jesus said, It is written, My house shall be called the house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves. Okay? My house should be a house of prayer. Now look, and here's Jesus talking about Jesus' house. Remember, this is Christ consciousness that we're talking about, all right? So go in the New Testament to page 202 in those little Bibles, and for the rest of you, go back to the book of Hebrews. Now, what did we say when we started this whole thing? It says Jesus went into the temple of God, and the Apostle Paul says, You are the temple of God. Now Jesus says, My house should be a house of prayer. All right, are you with me? In the book of Hebrews on chapter 3, okay? And verse 6, But Christ as a son over his own house, whose house are we? Say. Once again, it brings the thing, house, temple, whatever, right here between your ears. Back in Exodus 25, when God said to Moses, I'll meet with you between the wings of the cherubim. In the ancient pyramids, it was first set up that one of the cherubim had the face of a lion, which is on the right side, which means the spirit. The other cherubim had the face of a man, which was the Aquarian sign, which is the intellect. And here God said, I will meet you between the wings of the cherubim, meaning right here. Right here I'll meet you. And in fact, if you look at the ancient pyramids in Egypt, oh God, a terrible pyramid, but it doesn't look like a pyramid. There's a pyramid. And if you look at the pyramid, you'll see right between the two of them, and the equinox is where the sun, right smack in the center is where the sun goes down. And that's just a symbol. Between the wings of the cherubim, between your spirit and your intellect, I will come there. I will touch you with the earth. That's why the pyramids are constructed that way. Inside the pyramid are two chambers. There's the king's chamber, which is your pineal gland. There's the queen's chamber, which is your pituitary gland. The pyramid is the human brain. If you enter the pyramid, you can see it's just like, what do they do? Lobotomies? Whatever they call these things, where they go into people's brains to operate them. They go the same way. They go in the same route to go enter into the brain to get to those organs as you would if you were to climb into the pyramid or whatever you do. So Jesus says, my house must be a house of prayer. We are, Jesus. prayer is a communion with God. It's a leaving of our mind. Why do you have to leave your mind in order to pray? Let's just stop this for a minute. You cannot pray. How many have ever tried? You cannot pray using your mind. You can't do it. Go to page 148 in the New Testament. I know we're running around a lot, but it's no good if you don't see the thing. It's ridiculous if you say, well, that's what he said. So who cares what he said? What does it say? 148 in the New Testament, chapter 8 of Romans for the rest of you. You cannot pray. You cannot sit down and say, God, do this. God, do that. God, do the other thing. God, give me this. Oh, God, protect her. Oh, God, bring her home. And all of this kind of business, you can't do it. The only way you can pray is when you expose yourself, you leave that which is the lower mind, raise yourself into that which is the higher mind, and dwell in absolute nothingness, and then you become one with God. Why is it? Romans 8, verse 7. And the reason you cannot pray is because the carnal mind is enmity against God. It is not subject to the law of God, neither indeed can it be. Your mind is not subject to the law of God. It can't be subject to the law of God. Then how can you pray with your mind? You can't. You have to raise yourself above the mind. You have to allow that which is Christ consciousness, which is above the mind, to drive out the money changers, to overturn the tables of the dove sellers, and to leave that a holy place, a virgin place, a place of absolute bliss and whiteness, free of all external thought. No matter what kind of thought it is, it's got to be free of thought. But it won't work. Now, I want to just show you a couple other things. When you use your temple, it says, Jesus Christ says that your temple, and he's talking about your head, my head, is a den of thieves. And until you understand that Jesus said the kingdom is within you, Luke 17:21, until you understand that Jesus said at that time you will know I am in my Father, you in me, and I in you, until you understand that, you're going to be praying the way the church taught you, you're going to be praying the way Sunday school taught you, you're going to be praying the way the book said, you're going to be praying the way Aunt Tilly told you, or your mother told you, or whoever told you, you're going to do all of those things. But until you are in a place absolutely divine, your temple is a den of thieves. Many people have never, ever, ever experienced coming down, sitting on a floor, lifting themselves up, and separating from all thought and allowing that place to be a pure virgin experience in absolute nothingness. Many people have never experienced that, but they've been to church every day in their life. They go to church 3 and 4 times a week, have never experienced nothingness, have never experienced that divine bliss where there is not one thought, never experienced it. And I'm going to give you a statement that Jesus made. It's going to tell you that everything that you've ever done in your life as far as prayer is concerned, everything you've ever done in your life as far as religion is concerned, everything you've ever done with a Bible, with a book, or whatever, has never been anything other than thievery. There's never been one thing holy about it because your mind is involved in it. And as long as your mind is involved in it, it'll tell you anything it wants, and it'll twist it this way, and it'll twist it that way, and it'll get you interpreting it this way, and him interpreting it that way, and her interpreting it that way. And when the three of you interpret it differently, you'll start to argue about it, and then you'll get groups to follow you, and everybody will argue until finally you get guns with one another, and you start shooting at each other like they're poised to do over there in Iraq. In page 99 in your New Testament in the book of John, I want to show you something. John chapter 10, verse 8. This is talking about you prior to a meditational experience. All the prayers that you've ever done. Chapter 10, verse 8. Jesus Christ said, all that ever came before me are thieves and robbers. And that means all. And it means pastors, and it means churches, and it means evangelists, and it means religion, and it means all. It means me, it means anybody else who can talk you or try to talk you into anything. Anything that I put into your mind, anything that an evangelist or a church or a preacher puts into your mind is thievery. The only time that you'll be free of thievery in your mind is when you come within and in that light you experience the Christ. And I don't really care if you call him Buddha or you call him Zoroaster, if you call him Krishna, who you call him, you've got to raise yourself up into absolute nothingness and experience the divine temple, and there you are free of the thieves and the robbers. And brother, I'll tell you something. They'll take from you, and what will they steal from you? They'll steal the most precious thing that you have, your life. And from the time you're a little child, they'll convince you you're a worthless sinner and you're going to hell. I had a lady call me up yesterday from Alabama or somewhere and say that when she was a kid, she used to go with her mother and father into the church, and the pastor would make them kneel on the wooden floor, and they would have to pound their chests and say, "Oh, God, have mercy on me, a worthless sinner." And she said she went in her bed at 13 years old, and she had a vision of Jesus Christ who stood over her and said, "No, you're not a worthless sinner. I have chosen you to dwell in you." And she said, "I told my father, Dad, I don't want to start trouble in the family, but I'm not going back." And she says, "I've never set foot in one of those places again." And she's 90-some-odd years old. You're not a worthless sinner. He is you, and you are him, and his house is you. The temple is you. The holiness of the temple is you. You're special. And the only thing that has stopped you from maximizing your potential in this life is your inability or your ignorance of knowing that if you climb those circular stairs up into the right side, you will empty yourself into the upper room and sit at the right hand of the Father. Once you do that, your potential is unlimited in this world. That's what God wants. That's what Christ wants. Jesus didn't say he wants you to be a Christian. He wants you to be a Christ. That's what the Apostle Paul said. Apostle Paul didn't say I'm a good Christian. He said it is no longer I who live. It is Christ who lives within me. I have the mind of Christ. And I'll tell you something else. And you can look at Buddhists, and you can look at Krishnas, and you can look at all that and do what Christians do and what they do to one another, yell at it and make fun of one another and say they're wrong, that wrong, and they're wrong. And you say, well, we're born again and we're saved and we signed the card and we're going and all this stuff and we're good and the rest of them are going to hell in the bucket. Jesus Christ said something in John 10:16. And I want you to look at it on the same page you are. And listen what he says. It's about time we listen to this man, don't you think? "And other sheep I have, which are not of this fold. Them also must I bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd." Tell it to your pastor. Right into Christian television and tell them, folks, you're wrong. Because, that's right. And as you lay down your head in meditation and you raise yourself up into that place of divine nothingness, there you come unto that vibration with a Japanese Shinto priest, with a Roman Catholic priest, with a Protestant minister, with a Buddhist, whatever, all one. Because once, where's my stuff? Once you come in this beautiful, this is you, little trouble you had your little teeth problem, but that's all right. That's where you're dwelling right now, lower consciousness. But once you break through that and you move up here, you raise yourself up to that higher realm, and that's oneness. That is called the upper room. The upper room. Once you raise yourself to that place, you are one. Jesus did not want denominations. He did not want Christians and Jews and Buddhists and Christians. He said, I pray they may be one. And he said right here, he has other sheep that are not of this fold. And they hear his voice too. Don't you know what the heck he's talking about? Don't you know what he's talking about? Don't you know that the Buddhists hear his voice? Maybe they call him a different name, but they hear his voice. And the Krishnas hear his voice. And you hear his voice. Because you're one, and it's one shepherd. And that shepherd is the same as Buddha, who said, a Buddha has no fist. I come with you as with an open hand. Or a Jesus who says, if they strike you on the left side, turn to the right. It is that which is lay down your guns, lay down your arms, and embrace in peace and love and do not strike out in word or deed against another. Do not harm an animal. Do not harm a tree. Be a pacifist of God. And be in love. You saw two things today. Maybe you saw more than that. But a couple of things which maybe should have opened your eyes. But this is Jesus Christ saying, I must bring everybody. And it says in Matthew 21:14 that the blind and lame come into the temple and they're healed. Do you know what that is? When Christ comes into your consciousness, all of us who have been ignorant of these things suddenly say, wow, I can see. If you're going to sit here and emphasize the things that he did, you're going to miss the things that he does. Do you hear what I said? If you're going to concentrate on the things that a man did, you're going to miss the things that a God does. And the blind came into the temple. That means when you come into that holy place where now Christ dwells and you come in meditation, you will open your eyes and you will see and you will understand. And those of you who may not have been able to find a job, those of you who may not have two nickels to rub together, suddenly you'll find that as you come into this place and meet this one in that inner temple, in that divine place within you, suddenly you will find that all of a sudden you're able to stand on your own feet. You're able to walk by yourself. And things start to happen because the blind can see and the lame can walk. And that's the beauty of what happens when Christ enters into the temple and drives out the money changers and the dove sellers and makes it a house of prayer. And you winding stairs upward into that holy place and to the right side, casting your energies to there. You touch him and he touches you. That's what happens. That's what happens. That's what happens. We're going to just spend a minute